Really?
I actually like old toys. I like just to collect them, and I thought, well, I'd buy it for my son, who is now 14, and at the time he was only 3.
Well, he was too young for it
Yes.
then. So did he ever play with it?
Well, yes, he has put it out once or twice, but that's...
Because it's actually in pretty good condition. It doesn't seem to have suffered too much from knocks and bangs, which is good, and you've got a lot of the sections of track there. But the best thing for me is that it's actually a very early Hornby train set.
Really?
Yes. I suppose the majority that we see on the road shows tend to be the ones from the late 1920s and the 30s, and even some produced post-war. But this is one of the very first Hornby trains ever made. It was the first...
Really?
Yes. It was the first Hornby clockwork train set. Not the first, but from the first batch. Looking at it, it's very easy to see, if you were ever a Meccano fiend, which you may have been, I was certainly, that there are very obvious nuts and bolts here, which are part of the Meccano outfit. I mean, the nuts and the bolts, everybody will recognise from a normal Meccano set from that period. And of course, Frank Hornby started the Meccano business, and this was just an extension of it. And at a time when most of the toy trains that were available were tin plate and they were coming in from Germany, Frank Hornby made the conscious decision to make his trains types that could be taken to pieces, so constructional, if you like. And this particular train set dates from 1920, which is really jolly early.
Yes.
And you obviously didn't know all that, looking at the sort of shock horror on your face.
I didn't realise it at all.
Really?
No.
I hope that what I've said really hasn't led you to over-anticipate a high figure for it, because although from a historical point of view it's absolutely fascinating,
lovely,
and you know, I can go on for ages about this, that and the other, but it does have a value, I would say, of between perhaps £300 and £400, which is not considerable when you find out, for instance, that there are Hornby locomotives from the 1950s, one in particular called the Princess Elizabeth, which fetches over £1,000 just as a locomotive. So although this train set is, from a train collector's point of view, a wonderful thing and terribly important historically, it doesn't actually reflect in the value.
No, I think it's wonderful as it is.
You see quite a lot of money boxes on the roadshow, but I haven't seen one that's quite as unusual as this.
I thought you would see plenty like this.
No, I haven't. I've seen the type that you fire a gun and it goes into a hollow tree, and I've seen the chap that sits in a chair and puts a penny in his lapel pocket. But this one really is an unusual one. It's got a particular name, and it's called the Elephant with Three Clowns. There's somebody at the back of the elephant who's got a ball balanced on his feet, and at the front there's somebody holding a couple of acrobats' rings, and on the top there's somebody sort of balancing and showing himself off. Most of the money boxes were produced in America and were then exported or brought in to this country by people who travelled overseas. Now, show me how it works.
You put one penny, balance it just there,
And then
you pull that.
all right, can I have a
Yes,
go?
yes.
Do you have to do it gently or firmly?
Fairly sharply.
All right. Did it go?
No, not quite. Set it up again.
That's no good for a child that's going to save.
That's it.
In?
Yes,
Marvellous.
yes.
Well, the other nice thing is this action.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the trunk swings and the chap on the top turns round. It's a
Yes.
lovely action. There are a lot of collectors of these kind of money boxes, and when you look at the quality of the casting and the absolutely delightful action, you can understand why they are so popular with collectors. In America, it's a very big thing for some of the private banks to have a display of these small money boxes on their walls, and a lot of bank presidents collect. And some of the banks really can fetch a great deal of money. This is a more unusual one than the type that we normally see. And because of that, I think that we would be talking about perhaps between £400 and £600 at auction.
Oh,
The only thing that doesn't work on it is are the wheels. I believe the wheels are supposed to be connected to the propeller, and
But something's gone adrift.
something's gone adrift.
Well,
I don't want to sort of go too far with that.
you've got to make allowances for it. I mean, the plane was made in the mid-1930s, and I think perhaps our wheels wouldn't be quite connected after all that
It's
time.
been loved,
Yes.
and that's the main thing.
Yes.
It's been played.
Yes. Well, what's nice about it is, although it has been loved, it is still in very nice condition. On the front here, you can see the markings for the RAF, and it would have been made really at the time when Germany was in major sort of export drive mode, and it is made by a German company, but made for the English market with these RAF markings on it. Now, the way that I know immediately that it's made by a German manufacturer is by looking at these initials JD, and although it's the registration number of the plane, that would indicate to me that it's probably by a manufacturer called Dissler. So not always correct, but it's a useful rule of thumb, and in fact, that's what I hope to see, which is the Dissler trademark down there, which is a globe with the initials JDN written round, which is Johann Dissler of Nuremberg. So, super plain and absolutely indicative of the period in which it was made. But I suppose this is fascinating for me because it's an R100 airship.
Yes. The box is gone, but still.
Well, I'm amazed any bit
That's
of the
right,
box is
that's right.
there. And I think lifting off the lid and seeing really inside how flimsy everything is, I think it wouldn't have survived at all if the box hadn't been there.
That's right.
Have you had this one working?
Yes.
And
yes.
what does it do?
You put a string through the hole,
You put a string through here, yes.
hang it on the ceiling, and it will just gently go round and round.
Very nice.
You can wind it, it does work.
Again, very nice aluminium body, nice styling, very indicative of the time in which it was made. Again, early 30s. Made for the English market with these RAF markings on it. But look here, it's actually made in Japan. It says on the box lid, made in Japan. It's not generally known that the Japanese were great manufacturers of toys before the Second World War and after the Second World War. In fact, it was toys, really, that set the Japanese economy back on its feet again. I mean, they're not old toys, but they do have a value, and I would have said that the aeroplane, if it went into auction, would probably realise between perhaps £500 and £600. The R100, the airship, because it's Japanese and because the Japanese are very big buyers now, I would have said that that could be worth perhaps the same sort of figure.
I don't think it's stuffed. I don't. I think it's papier-mâché. In fact, I'm absolutely positive it's papier-mâché. And I would have thought it's probably about 1910. I don't think it's any earlier than that. Of course, Steiff in Germany made a lot of these. But I don't think it's Steiff. I think it is probably German. It could be French, actually. Cowhide covering. And the fact that these wheels... this shape is started in about 1880, this actual type of wheel in the Steiff factory, and it's a very expensive toy of its time.
Oh, well.
I mean, I think it would have been a rich family who would have given their child something like this for Christmas.
I just liked it. It was the look of the head. Such a lovely dog.
At auction, I would put it at probably between £500 and £800.
Oh dear.
Because it's so rare.
Tell me about this marvellous circus. Now, was it yours? Was it your children's?
My husband made it up. He had a collection of animals, so he decided to make the proper circus.
And was he particularly interested in circuses?
Oh, he was always interested in circus. As a tiny boy, he used to peep under the canvas when the circus was in town.
Well, I can see that his love of the circus has transformed itself into this marvellous layout. And on the whole, what we're looking at are lead circus figures. Now, this
Yes.
this board obviously didn't come with the circus. Did he make that?
Yes, oh yes.
And what about this marvellous arrangement here of the striped awnings?
Well, that was below the tent. You
So
know,
there's
the
a tent that goes on top?
on top, yes.
Oh, I must have a look at that afterwards. So this is just the inner circle, if you like. And what is incredible is the fact that it's in such good condition. Now, your children must have been very careful with it when they played with it.
Yes, they had to be.
I can imagine. They were obviously closely supervised, were
Yes,
they?
yes, they were.
Well, let me have a look at some of these acts in isolation. At the front there's a kangaroo boxing with a clown, I can see.
Yes.
And then there are these marvellous acrobats standing on their hands on the back of the chairs. And I think the thing that I like best is what we've got in the middle here, which is this wonderful high wire act with a lady on the trapeze underneath and the clown on top holding an umbrella. Now, it looks to me as if these come from a variety of different makers. Certainly, the high wire act is Britain's, because I can see here, there's the original box. It says the flying trapeze. But that's very nice with the original label on it. But there's another make which is particularly known for some of its circus figures, and that's a make called Charbons. And quite a lot of the other figures here are by that particular make. I suppose that this piece here really must be the most exciting. Not only does it look the most interesting, it actually is the most interesting. Collectors are fascinated by that particular toy, and that on its own would be worth perhaps a couple of £100.
Would it?
Yes, it would, in that sort of condition, just that one piece. And in
That's
fact,
surprising.
but overall, I mean, the fact that you've got so many of these different acts and that they're in, on the whole, very good condition, I think that one has to be looking at perhaps 800 or perhaps as much as £1,000 for everything
For
that you
the
have
whole
here.
thing.
So I think you did very well not to let your children wreck it.
Yeah.
This is your entire collection, is it? Or is this just a bit
It's
of
a
it?
bit of it, yeah.
Well, I'm amazed. When did you start?
My parents started me off years ago before I was born.
And which was the first car that you actually went out and bought, or which was the earliest recollection that you have here of all the cars?
I'm not really sure, to tell you the truth. It's probably these two.
Yes, I mean they look very sort of bright and flashy, and they're everything that a toy car ought to be. But in fact, the most interesting one is this one, which is a little dinky toy made between about 1936 and 1938. And what's interesting about it is the fact that at the front, it's got the radiator is actually a piece of tin plate which has been put on. I suppose, really, next in date order, we're going to be looking at something like that, which is a Triang Minic toy, another English toy, and that is, I think that's a German, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a shoe. Yeah, it's a shoe case.
That's
It's the
another
same as
shoe
these
case.
ones.
So these three here are the English contenders,
Yeah.
and all roughly the same date. It's between 1930 and 1940. The Schuko cars were different in that they were made of tin plate rather than being die-cast, which is what the dinky toys were.
Yeah.
And they came in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Now, this one is interesting because this was voice activated. And have you got the key to this? Does it still work?
I haven't got a key with me, I'm afraid. No,
Not
it
to
does
worry.
work. Yeah, they all work.
And what you have to do, you shout at it, don't you? And it stops, and
That's
then you
it, yeah.
shout at it
And
again, and
it
it goes.
goes.
And that's all done through the grill at the top. So I suppose you must have quite a sort of heavy sort of shout. And then off it goes. And underneath, there's the very nice detail of the engine. This Schuko car, well, in fact, they're both very similar, aren't they? I like this one particularly because it's got a gear lever, and you've actually got forward and reverse gears. Did you used to play with this? I mean, you say...
No.
So when you first got these, even as a child, you knew that you weren't supposed to play with them?
Well, they were bought for me, and they was put in a display cabinet.
And you weren't ever tempted?
No.
So what did you play with?
Well, my parents bought me ordinary modern cars to play with.
So that's a nice little group of cars. And the value of those are going to be really quite surprising. I suppose that everybody knows that early dinky toys are valuable.
Yeah.
And that particular toy in that sort of condition would be talking about perhaps 250 to 300 pounds, which I guess is, I hope it's more than either you or your parents paid for it. But I think that what's more surprising to people these days is the value on these later tin plate cars, because there are a lot of people now who collect just Schuko cars in the way that they used to collect just dinkies. And these two rather larger cars, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see those at 150 or 180 pounds a piece. And the voice command car, perhaps 100, and so on.
Now, you sent us a lovely letter, and it says, my mum said I should send these photographs to you of my bedroom furniture. My grandma bought this for me about 6 years ago, just before she died. So this is all your furniture, is it? And you want to know a little bit about it?
Yeah.
Do you use it? Do you have it all in your bedroom?
No, well, I have the bookcase in my bedroom. That's usually with all my Beanos and books from.
Oh, wonderful.
And I used to have this in my bedroom, but it's got too big.
Ah, you got too big.
No, it's wet. It's very, very huge.
Right. I see. And do you like it?
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily to everybody's taste, but I think it's absolutely wild. It's tremendously colourful and exciting. And you can make all sorts of stories out of it, I think. What do you think's going on here?
Well, I look like they're just riding home from a battle on there.
Home from battle, I think that's a very good idea. You've got a wonderful story on the front of this bed, haven't you, with a procession of lords and ladies. Perhaps the ladies have gone out to meet the lords, and they've been in battle, they're wearing armour, and they're coming home in triumph into the castle, I think. But it's quite funny, isn't it, because the faces are a bit peculiar. What do you think of the faces that you've got here? I mean, this lady who's looking out at you, she's a bit horrifying, isn't she?
Yeah.
And I think that this was made in about the 1920s, but it's looking back a long, long way further than that. You've probably seen lots of churches around, which are very much like this sort of decoration at the back of the bed with these pointy arches and so on. It's quite unusual to find furniture like this which has still got the colour on it. Lots of people have taken the colour off, and of course in the original old furniture in the 16th, 15th century, it was usually painted like this in lots of bright colours. So this is in a way much more real in looking backwards, but the characters are a bit more like a cartoon. This is all oak. Did you know it was oak?
Yeah.
And you can tell it's oak by all this sort of flashing, these light bits in it, which is very characteristic of oak. And again, oak was used in the Middle Ages. Now, you also said in your letter you were interested in what it might be worth.
Yeah.
Have you any idea?
No.
No? None at all. Well, some people might not find this particularly attractive, and that's always going to make a difference in the value, but there's lots of people who would think this was great fun, and probably you might find that you could sell it for about £2,000 to £3,000.
Really?
This is my father, or a caricature of my father. He was editor of the Dandy from its first day in 1937 until he retired in 1982.
Wonderful.
45 years. Desperate Dan was modelled on my father. My father's instructions to the artist were to draw him bigger than life, with a chin like mine, like a chest of drawers. And Dudley Watkins was the artist.
How wonderful. Now, this isn't a Watkins, is it?
No. This was drawn 2 years ago when I asked the artist, who actually temporarily took over after Dudley Watkins died. And this is by Charlie Gregg. He did this for me.
How wonderful.
As a memento.
And these were also done for you, weren't they?
Yes.
Here we've got Christmas 1950 from Paddy Brennan, with all the well-known characters there: Keyhole Kate, Corky the cat, Desperate Dan, Hungry Horace, and all the others.
Yes, yes.
And so this was a tradition, was it, for you to have these cards every Christmas?
It started around about 1950, and it carried on for a number of years.
Now, this is 1954. Were you a teenager at that point?
Yes, yes.
So this is modelled on your antics.
Yes.
Listening to Frankie Lane.
Although I was never so glamorous.
Now, this one. Tell me about this one. This looks terribly politically incorrect. Christmas dinner in surgery. A nice bit of leg for matron. Now, what's this about?
That's 58?
58, yes.
I started medical school in 1957. I think I started doing anatomy about that time, you see.
And I see what you've got to drink is a decanter of Group A blood. Wonderful. Now, of course, the connection with Dandy goes further than just yourself, because the local firm in Dundee, D.C. Thompson, they were the publishers of Dandy and Beano and all sorts of other children's comics, weren't they? Mm-hmm. What was its circulation in its heyday?
In 1950, there were quite a number of weeks that the circulation was over 2 million.
Quite extraordinary. The artwork for Dandy comes up for sale very, very seldom, because most of it, of course, is held in the archives of D.C. Thompson. So to have this very special group drawn by some of the best names in the cartoon world and also featuring some of the most important comic characters makes them financially quite interesting too. I would have thought that each card is going to be worth upwards from £150. So you can do the mathematics yourself.
Yes,
I mean, it is
yes.
a seriously important collection, and one which deserves to be looked after, which I'm sure you do.
Oh, I would
and
never part with
occasionally,
them.
very occasionally, let somebody else have a glimpse.
Yes.
This is Pooh in a state of evolution, we might say, embryonic Pooh. And because his nose is more pointed and his legs are thinner. And I got it from Shepard's daughter, Mary.
E.H. Shepard, the great illustrator of A.A. Milne's stories.
And she said that is Pooh evolving from the family Teddy, who was called Growler.
Yes. So he's not quite the sort of the rotund, dumpy little Pooh that we all know and love from the books.
Yes, eating too much.
Because he's not quite there yet. And underneath, Tigger.
Tigger, who is just sprung fully formed from the head of his creator, I think. You know, he just looks like Tigger looks, to me, Tigger looks in the book.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Now, I did slightly worry about the line of it, because you see it's rather loosely done compared to what we're used to, particularly when you look at the finished drawings in the books. But it's quite possible that, and I've seen Shepard drawings that are loose, that it's just a few thoughts going through his head, isn't it, on this sketchy piece of paper. And he's got this jar of honey as well, and you can see the Y of honey is not quite. I think the N is supposed to be the wrong way round, isn't it, with honey?
Yes, they're not great on
not
spelling.
Not quite got there yet. No. Now, the astonishing thing about a drawing like this is how very popular it can be. I don't know what it is, but particularly amongst Americans, it's like buying a piece of the charm of your own childhood back again. At least I assume that's what it must be, because they do pay the most astonishing sums for such things. Do you know what it's worth at all, or have any idea?
No, I don't, but it's different from being an actual illustration to the story. I see that.
I think so. Now, the finished pen and ink drawings for Winnie the Pooh, recently, two of them separately achieved £60,000 plus premium. Now, it's difficult to know where to put exactly to place this drawing in the structure of prices, but I think, given that it is a working drawing, it's got to have an interest of its own as well. You know, I think it's going to add to its interest. Well, really, I think that we've got to put £10,000 to £15,000 on this drawing. And given the level of interest in Pooh, and E.H. Shepard generally, I wouldn't be at all surprised if two American collectors fought each other and drove it very much higher than that.